the Trump administration has been, well, let's call it a circus these past few weeks. Hirings, firings, bans, tweets, all staples of the president's MO have been front and center in the headlines recently. But taking a backseat to all of that in the news has been major developments regarding the investigation into Trump's Russia connections and Congress's failed attempts at healthcare legislation. So the question is, are we being distracted from bigger issues in the White House? Joining us to discuss is Republican strategist and the author of the book GOP GPS, Evan Siegfried. Thank you, Evan, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Evan, what's your take on this? These moves, like forcing Anthony Scaramucci, Reince Priebus to resign, banning transgender Americans from the military, are these strategic distractions, or is this a sign of a lack of discipline?
Well, you called it a circus. That would be a compliment and a much better situation than we're in. This is much more closer to a prison riot. There's really nobody at the helm of the administration figuring out how to move things strategically. With moving things like Reince Priebus out, all the president had to do was ask for his resignation, and he would have given it. He didn't need to bring in Anthony Scaramucci as a hired gun, which he wasn't. He was more of a suicide bomber who blew up Reince Priebus's career as well as his own and created a massive distraction from many different things and positive results that the president had last week.
Prison riot, the bomber, this is imagery that should be alarming to some people, but how much of this lack of message discipline is hurting the president's ability to deliver on his agenda?
It's absolutely crippling it. To be honest with you, the president, every time he goes off and fires off a tweet or says something controversial, it impacts how Republicans in Congress can actually get things done. Republicans in Congress want to talk about tax reform, and they wanted to sell their Obamacare repeal and replacement bill. But every time they went to talk about it, nobody cared about it. The press was asking them about whether or not they agreed with what the president was saying, even if it was something completely innocuous. The president is basically a tabloid president running a reality TV presidency, and it's crippling the way for government to move forward and be successful.
So, Evan, taking away the president's ability to tweet, would that be the easiest, most effective, and one of the biggest and essential things to do to get this administration back on track in terms of messaging?
No, I think a lot of people are missing that it's not a question of whether or not we take away President Trump's ability to tweet. It's a question of how do we get President Trump to tweet in a focused manner that stays on message that benefits himself. We've seen him shoot himself in the foot. Early on in the administration, he tweeted out that he thought that President Obama had wiretapped Trump Tower. And now we have that. We have him saying that there were 3 to 5 million illegal voters in the election. And we now have a commission looking into that that's just trying to prove his conspiracy theory, despite zero evidence of that. So the president needs to go out and tweet about, say, health care. If we had gone back 2.5, 3 weeks, and the president were going out and saying, hey, go out and call your representatives and senators, tell them you want Obamacare repealed and replaced. Tell them that you think that this bill helps people to do X, Y, or Z. That would have been beneficial. But instead, we have him going out and tweeting. And yesterday morning, he actually put out a tweet saying, complimenting a commentator for saying that corporations are making more money than ever. But that was something that is actually going to hinder him in the tax reform fight that's coming up, because now it gives Democrats, his opposition, ammunition to say, well, why do we need to cut corporate taxes for corporations?
Let's talk personnel for a second. Scaramucci experienced his grand opening, his grand closing in 11 days. The communications director position is vacant. Does he need to be in a rush, the president, to replace Scaramucci, or can he leave that position unfilled for now?
He does need to have a communications department that functions. We've seen this position. Scaramucci was the second communications director. They couldn't, or technically third. His first communications director never even made it to the inauguration because he was outed for having an affair with another staffer. And then we had Mike Dubke come in February of the administration. He left by the end of May. And then this was vacant for 2 months, and then Anthony Scaramucci filled it for a record 10 days. The only person who held it for a shorter time turned out to actually have been a member of the Hitler Youth. So we have a president who is finding all of these positions that he needs to fill, but there are no qualified Republicans who are willing to go in and do this. The problem with the Trump administration is these are the C team. It's not even the B team. These are the people who would be desperate to get a job, whereas the people who understand how to work in government and have had high-level executive branch experience, they don't want anything to do with it because they see a president who is disloyal, and it's a one-way loyalty, and who will throw them under the bus at a moment's notice.
Evan Siegfried, thank you so much for your insight this morning. It's truly appreciated.